I thought I would go through a graphic that I made for shoulder conditions today, and the reason why you should be watching this is if you don't understand what you feel like you should understand about the shoulder, what the rotator cuff is, what it does, how the shoulder blade's connected, how the lats, the delts, the pec major are all correlated to the shoulder. This is a must watch right here because I can tell you from personal experience working with people is a lot of times people have a lot of misunderstanding of what the actual shoulder blade, what it actually does, how it correlates to impingement, rotator cuff tears. And I know a lot of people feel like if they're doing rows or pull-ups, they're doing enough for the shoulder. So I'm here to go over, not necessarily, we're not going to go over some exercises today, but we're going to go over some theory of why we should be working some of the surrounding areas and why there's a time and place for exercises like rehab-based ones. So let's do a little screen share right here, if I can figure out how to do this. Okay. All right. So this is not what you want to see. Okay. So everyone, right here is a graphic that I made on the 3 Ps of the shoulder. Let me get it a little bit to a better frame here. So 3 Ps of the shoulder, this was a term that was coined back in, I think, the 90s by Dr. Job from Curlin and Job. So what, ooh, gosh, it's gonna be a little tougher than I thought here. So the shoulder really has 3 different types of muscles. There's glenohumeral protectors, which is your rotator cuff and your bicep long head tendon. Then it has pivoters, and this is talking about shoulder blade pivoters, which is more in this region, such as the trap, the rhomboids, the levator scapula, the serratus anterior. And then we have humeral positioners, this is what moves your shoulder or your humeral head and the shaft of your humerus through space. So we have the pec major, the lat dorsi, the delt should be on here as well, but it's not, but the teres major. So these are all the major movers of the shoulder. But all these other ones, the rotator cuff, its job is to protect the ball and socket. The pivoters, the job they have is to put the shoulder blade into the right position for the prime movers to do their work. So this is what I want to go through. I'll go through each section today and really get you to understand how a shoulder needs to be rehabbed. Now, let's quickly go into the graphic and just take a look at the different parts of the shoulder. I won't spend too long on this, but let's see if I can share that screen again. By the way, if you're a healthcare provider and you want a poster like this, I do make them for the office. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that these are not exclusive to me. I want to make sure that you have the same stuff to educate your patients. So, okay. So let's zoom in a little bit here. First, let's start with those protectors of the glenohumeral joint. By the way, if everyone doesn't know what the glenohumeral joint is, this is the ball and socket right here. Notice, see that ball? It's sitting on the socket. So this is actually called the humeral head. So we even noted humerus, humeral head, and the scapula with the shoulder blade is the other part you need to be concerned about with the whole thing, which is considered as the shoulder complex. So there are muscles attaching everywhere, which does play into how the shoulder complex moves. But for the most part, let's look at these bony areas first. So this is a clavicle, which comes across here from the neck, attaches to, this is called the AC joint, acromioclavicular joint, which we did not note on here. The acromion, and just underneath it is called the subacromial space. Just take a look to see how this is a tendon which comes through. Here's a bursa sitting there, and here is the biceps tendon, which also goes underneath it. So there's stuff in here that's really important, all right? And I can't stress that enough because when we raise this arm, this space right here needs to be preserved in regards to size. Some people, when they move poorly, this thing slips up, the humeral head slips up and starts digging into the stuff in there, which then creates impingement and cuff tears. Now, when we look at the rotator cuff, we have 4 muscles that make up the rotator cuff. The most commonly torn one is the supraspinatus, which comes over this spine of the scapula. This is looking at the backside. It comes under the subacromial space, and it basically presents itself right here again. The infraspinatus is probably one of the most, it's probably the second or third most commonly injured ones. It's just below that. It sits on the backside of the shoulder, which if we look down here, it's kind of like back in this area. Supraspinatus is here. And the teres minor is almost like the infraspinatus, except for it is a division of which they're almost technically the same muscle, I think, in my book. The subscapularis has a lot to do with decreasing the amount of anterior humeral translation, or bringing this forward. This is common amongst baseball pitchers and throwers, and a lot of times an unstable shoulder will present with, when it has a subscapularis issue, you have to give it a little bit of synthetic stabilization by doing something like a relocation or an apprehension test. And that will usually show the patient that they have some type of subscapular issue. Now let's go on to the pivoters. Okay, so we have the pivoters here. So the first thing I note about the pivoters is the whole point of them is to putting the shoulder blade in the correct position for decreasing impingement. And now I know I just mainly talked about impingement in that subacromial space, but really impingement leads to a lot of cuff tears and shoulder pain at night, shoulder pain with throwing, shoulder pain with raising your arm above head, especially with lifting. So if you don't get these muscles, there's a lower possibility of having normal movements overhead. Okay, I'm gonna differentiate those a little bit, but I know it's not in this video per se, but we have to make sure that all these things are working well before we actually go overhead. Okay, movement patterns are a little bit different than how muscles work. So these muscles here, there's the trapezius. So number one, there's the trap right here. The trap is differentiated into 3 different segments, they say. So there's the upper trap, there's the middle trap, and there's the lower trap. And what we did on this picture was you can see these striations, okay? Each section has a little bit different function, okay? We won't go into that too much. The deltoid is not a pivoter of the shoulder blade. Let me be clear about that. The serratus anterior, which actually here, it's a little bit always hard to depict. So I had a side view all on its own. It's actually kind of into the rib cage region, okay? It's on the front side of the blade. It's on the back side. Now we have the levator scapula right here, and we have the rhomboids, all right? So all of these muscles' job is to put the shoulder blade into the best position possible to transfer weight and transfer load, which then we come into the humeral positioners. All right, the humeral positioners, the large muscles, and these are the ones that you think about when you go to the gym. You're like, I'm just going to work these things, make them stronger and bigger and more aesthetic and so on. So the pec major, the latissimus dorsi, or the lat, and the teres major. I know you probably don't think that with that. We should have included deltoid on this list, but it's over here in this picture. I might make that correction later if you guys plan on getting it for your office. But we do have the pec major, we have the deltoid, we have the latissimus dorsi, which is going to be labeled over here. I will make some corrections. And we have the teres major. The minor's in here just for show. So these are the important divisions of muscles in the shoulder girdle. Now, we didn't talk about other muscles of the body, which then, let's go off of screen share, stop screen sharing. So there are other muscles of the body which are important in regards to shoulder health. And if you listen to the most recent podcast, which was number 47, it might not be the most recent by the time you guys watch this, but 47 was the Simple Shoulder Solution by Max Schenk. That it talks about some of the other things that we can actually look at for the shoulder, such as breathing, core strength, motion of the mid-back, the neck, and then the shoulder complex, just as we noted there. Now, there's also another one, 48, which is coming out by Dr. Scott Mills, where we talk about some other things that we can look at for shoulder function. So if you are having shoulder pain, or if you're a doctor who has a patient with shoulder pain, these are great resources for you, so you guys can help better understand how to actually decrease potential of these things coming back, but also getting a lot of patient compliance is what I've been focused on most over the last few years. Not necessarily to get them to come back because I want them to spend extra time and spend money with me, but when it comes to actually rehab, we have to make sure that we are getting the people to do the right things at home. And giving them a piece of paper doesn't always cut it. Showing them these pictures doesn't always cut it. So maybe they need an explanation like this. So the podcasts are out there for resources for you guys. So if you have more questions about this, whether you're a patient or a doctor, feel free to put it below this video. I will be explaining some more shoulder cases as well as some other graphics that I made for the shoulder throughout the next series. So if you haven't seen it already, I will post this within a shoulder playlist that hopefully you'll get all the stuff that I'm talking about right then and there. So if you haven't been to my site already, it's p2sportscare.com. Check it out. I try to put everything on there. Talk to you guys soon.